on fallout after the special counsel's office disputes a bombshell report about the president, one that accused him of ordering his former personal attorney, Michael Cohen, to lie to Congress. Welcome back to America's Newsroom Monday morning. I'm Sandra Smith.
And Sandra, good to be with you this morning. Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Shawn in for Bill Hemmer. Well, BuzzFeed, as you know, was standing by its reporting even after Robert Mueller's office took the extraordinary step of putting out that statement, calling the story inaccurate. Vice President Mike Pence weighing in on Fox News Sunday.
It was remarkable what we saw happening for 24 hours in the media on the basis of the report that appeared in BuzzFeed. And I just think it's one of the reasons why people are so frustrated with many in the national media and the constant obsession on this.
Chief White House correspondent John Roberts is live with more from the White House this morning. John, good morning.
Sandra, good morning to you. These were the most explosive allegations that have been leveled against the president yet. Allegations that, if true, could constitute obstruction of justice or at the very least be grounds for impeachment in the House. The special counsel's office going to great lengths on Friday, taking the unprecedented step of issuing a statement to refute the allegations. The spokesman saying, quote, BuzzFeed's description of specific statements to the special counsel's office and characterization of documents and testimony obtained by this office regarding Michael Cohen's congressional testimony are not accurate. The president reacting on Twitter immediately after the statement saying, remember, it was BuzzFeed that released the totally discredited dossier paid for by crooked Hillary Clinton and the Democrats as opposition research on which the entire Russian probe is based. A very sad day for journalism, but a great day for our country. And as you pointed out at the top, the vice president reacting yesterday with Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday. Here's more of what he said.
Well, the president expressed his appreciation to the special counsel for clarifying that report was inaccurate. But I think what it says more about is the obsession of many in the national media to attack this president for any reason, for any allegation, for any report in the media.
As Eric pointed out at the top, BuzzFeed is standing by its story, insisting that its sources say stick with it. Here's one of the reporters.
We're being told to stand our ground. This is our reporting is going to be borne out to be accurate, and we're 100% behind it.
Not surprising that BuzzFeed would stand behind this article, Sandra, because if it is proven to be false, it's the sort of thing that could take down an entire news organization. One thing important to point out is that of all the other really, really well-sourced news organizations in this country, no one else has been able to corroborate the information that BuzzFeed had. Sandra?
Well, the president over the weekend offered a proposal to Democrats. Dems don't seem to be budging in response to the president. John, so what do they want to see from the president?
Well, that's putting it mildly. The president put an offer on the table, some sweeteners, if you will, to try to get the government reopened by bringing the Democrats back to the negotiating table. The Democrats simply said it's a non-starter. What the president put on the table on Saturday was a 3-year extension of protection for the so-called Dreamers, the deferred action for childhood arrivals, and a 3-year extension of temporary protected status for other people in this country in exchange for $5.7 billion to build a border barrier. The president also saying he wants this to serve as the beginning of a bigger negotiation on immigration reform. Listen here.
Once the government is open and we have made a down payment on border security and immigration reform starts to happen, I plan to convene weekly bipartisan meetings at the White House so we can do a finished product, a great product.
For their part, Democrats had no counteroffer. They simply said the president's offer was unacceptable and that the shutdown needs to end. Here's Chuck Schumer.
The American people are overwhelmingly against it. The president's poll ratings are plummeting because even his own supporters agree that this is a bad tactic. And it's very hard to negotiate when a gun is held to your head.
Mitch McConnell has promised to bring legislation to the Senate floor sometime this week. Here's something that neither side is talking about, too, Sandra, just before we go. This $5.7 billion, the president wants to build about 170 miles of border wall in Texas. That wall has to be built away from the riverbank. So people who want to come into this country, like all those Honduran immigrants who want to be apprehended by the border control, a new border barrier will not stop that from happening. Sandra?
John Roberts from the White House this morning. Thank you.
Well, for more on all this now, let's join by Tom Rogan, commentary writer at the Washington Examiner. Man, oh man, Tom, the BuzzFeed story. I mean, they're doubling down, saying they not only stand by the story, but they are reconfirming it. What do you want to see from them?
Well, I think John Roberts is correct in his assessment just then for you that actually BuzzFeed doesn't have much maneuver room here, because even though there has been this remarkable pushback from the special counsel's office, they have a lot to lose if it turns out to be false. So I think in the coming days, we will need to see more details from the sources. If this is true, as the BuzzFeed reporters suggested it is, then their sources would have good reason, and they would have good reason to extract that information from the sources of added detail here to buffer this up.
What could the sources, say? Here's part of the statement that BuzzFeed put out. They say, as we've reconfirmed our reporting, we see no indication that any specific aspect of our story is inaccurate. We remain confident in what we've reported and will share more as we are able. So specifically, what could they say, more to try and flesh this out?
Well, I think the obvious thing they would have to show is the tenor of the documents that they reference as corroborating material for what Cohen, they claim, has told prosecutors. What is the backup material there in terms of emails, communications? If that doesn't come to light, then I think, again, we will see the continuing degradation of the story's credibility. So on their part, that would be the first emphasis. And it is something you would suspect that the sources would be willing to say, because they ultimately, this is, in any source-journalist relationship, there is a bound interest from both sides. Each side wants something out of it, and both of them would appear to want this to be credible.
Well, clearly the sources, whoever they are, wanted to get this out, as you point out. And they quote two federal law enforcement officials. There are a lot of them. Yeah. They may not be with Mueller. What Mueller says may be true. Is it possible they could be from the Southern District of New York? Or how about the IRS? Even a Postal Service inspectors or something. Do you want to see more about who the sources are, who could then potentially contradict Mueller's claim?
Well, obviously, they have to protect their sources. That's rule number one. But at the same time, you've got to ask the question here, if there is no further information forthcoming, do these people, even if they have said it, have the actual grounding to be able to credibly say what they have said, the sources? Or, as you suggest, are they two people off in a very different agency who have heard things, 2 or 3 steps down the line, and have decided, actually, I want to make news here, I want to make a wave, and the reporters have jumped on it because it seems so juicy. So that credibility factor, again, is the exigent concern here.
And finally, we may find out on February 7th when Mr. Cohen testifies. He will likely be asked directly, did the president tell you to lie? And we'll get the answer from the horse's mouth then. Tom Rogan, always good to see you. Thank you.
You too. Oh, thank you.
New video is shedding light on the high school student and a Native American man during a rally in D.C. last Friday. The footage seems to back up the teenager's account that he was not mocking the Vietnam veteran and was actually trying to defuse a tense situation, but not before the incident exploded on social media. Garrett Tenney has more on all of this from Washington this morning. Garrett?
Yeah, Sandra, those initial videos only showed part of the story, but the images of a crowd of students surrounding a Native American man who was playing a drum and singing went viral, with headlines claiming the Catholic students were wearing Make America Great Again hats were mocking the 66-year-old Nathan Phillips. There was widespread outrage criticizing the students from Covington Catholic High School in Kentucky who were in D.C. to attend the March for Life, including from several lawmakers, such as Congresswoman Deb Haaland, who tweeted in part, "The students' display of blatant hate, disrespect, and intolerance is a signal of how common decency has decayed under this administration. Heartbreaking." Well, over the weekend, new footage emerged showing that Phillips was the one who approached the group. And on the video, you can also hear several members of the Black Hebrew Israelites who were there as well, taunting the students for being white and yelling things such as, "White people, go back to Europe where you came from." Nick Sandman is the high school junior who became the face of this incident after Phillips stood inches away from him. On Sunday, he released a statement sharing his version of what happened and said, "I believed that by remaining motionless and calm, I was helping to defuse the situation. I realized everyone had cameras and that perhaps a group of adults was trying to provoke a group of teenagers into a larger conflict." He continues, "I am a faithful Christian and practicing Catholic, and I always try to live up to the ideals my faith teaches me. to remain respectful of others and to take no action that would lead to conflict or violence. Now, he also said both he and his family have received physical and death threats over the past few days, thanks to the social media mob that jumped all over that initial story. Sandra?
All right, Garrett Tenney, thank you.
You got it.
Well, the Senate will take up the president's compromise on immigration. You know, it offers both sides, well, some of what they want. But can the deal get enough Democratic support in the House? Coming up, we'll ask Republican Congressman Mark Walker about that.
And the nation pauses to remember civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. We will speak to one of the men who stood alongside King during that era and was with him the day he died. Reverend Jesse Jackson will join us live coming up. You're looking live now at the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial in Washington, D.C. President Trump and Vice President Pence have just arrived there a short time ago, honoring the civil rights leader.
Good morning, everybody. Great day. It's a beautiful day. And thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Mr. President, can you come and talk about the shutdown at all? Anything to say about Democrats rejecting
the president arriving there just a short time ago? He had tweeted from the White House on this special day. Today we celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. for standing up for the self-evident truth Americans hold so dear. That no matter what the color of our skin or the place of our birth, we are all created equal by God. Hashtag MLK Day, the president said just a short time ago. Vice President Pence joining him as well. This is the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial. If you've ever visited or decide to at a future date, it's located in West Potomac Park, right next to the National Mall there in Washington, D.C. It's open around the clock. A very special moment there for the president and vice president.
It is a very solemn and somber moment in remembrance of the great civil rights leader. It is called the Stone of Hope. It is made out of granite, and it is steps away from where Martin Luther King delivered the famed "I Have a Dream" speech at the Lincoln Memorial steps. Quite a remembrance today in Washington.
And remember, a man who called MLK Jr. a friend and a mentor, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, will be joining us live coming up.
Border security, DACA, TPS, and many other things. Straightforward, fair, reasonable, and common sense with lots of compromise. Our proposal is not intended to solve all of our immigration challenges. This plan solves the immediate crisis, and it is a horrible crisis.
That is the president pushing his deal to end the government shutdown, one that offers a 3-year extension of protections for the Dreamers in exchange for $5 billion plus in wall funding. But Democrats are calling it a non-starter.
Handedly took away DACA and TPS protections in the first place. Offering some of those protections that he took away back in exchange for the wall is not a compromise, but hostage-taking.
Joining us now, Congressman Mark Walker, a Republican from North Carolina, who is the vice chair of the House GOP conference. Congressman, thank you for your time this morning. So the president sweetens his offer in an attempt to negotiate with Democrats over the weekend. Democrats basically respond, calling it a non-starter.
Yeah, it's interesting, Sandra. It's always a pleasure to be with you guys. These ideas came from Democrats just last week. The humanitarian assistance, $800 million, the DACA, the TPS. These were submitted by Democrats. As you use the term sweeten, the president has continued to sweeten, but still hasn't been enough to move Speaker Pelosi and Chuck Schumer off some of the hard, fast positions they have continued to hold.
So I just wonder where this leaves us. What a weekend that was, thinking that the president would take to the microphone to publicly sweeten his offer to Democrats. And they've basically responded to all that, saying it's a no-go. John Sununu, the former governor of New Hampshire, was on with us earlier and said this.
Speaker Pelosi and Chuck Schumer have not been serious about this all along. I think the president has to focus on trying to get his message across to the folks who don't support him out there. I think he's got to focus on the fact that they're not coming to the table. And he's got to talk about the fact that they have supported this position in the past.
I mean, Chuck Schumer held a press conference yesterday saying this isn't a compromise, this is hostage taking. How do you go forward?
Well, first of all, that terminology is preposterous. But we've also seen some of the other members of leadership on the Democratic side begin to break ranks. Speaker Pelosi has continued to use the terminology immoral. How offensive is that? I'm kind of getting weary of those who are saying that Speaker Pelosi is only trying to appease the very hard radical left. She is the radical left and the most extremist of this whole negotiating process. Republicans have continued to try to move to find some kind of middle ground, but she's refused to allow us to move forward. Listen, as a former minister, I look at it this way. God loves all people equally, the migrant, us, but we also have an obligation, Speaker Pelosi and I both, we take an oath to protect the safety and the security of the American people. To me, that's the most immoral behavior that she can really reveal, is continuing to use the terminology. Chuck Schumer's hostage taking, Speaker Pelosi is using the terminology immoral. When Steny Hoyer last week even acknowledged there are places alongside the border that structures would make a sense, reducing or even eliminating some of the problems that we've seen.
He said walls work. And you know, when I ask where does this all go, we know that the State of the Union is coming up. In the wake of all this, Nancy Pelosi suggested to the president that he does not publicly deliver the State of the Union address. I wonder what you think is going to happen with that as well, considering that's just over a week away now.
Well, I believe Article 2, Section 3 allows the president to convene both houses if he feels like there is an extraordinary circumstance. This is an extraordinary circumstance because it's never been done before, where the Speaker of the House rescinded an offer to the president to address not only the houses but also to our country. I hope she gets her heart right in this, and you've had a beautiful tribute already to Martin Luther King Jr. I believe it was his words that says the time to do something right is right now. I hope that we can continue to move forward and get this done. This is ridiculous. It's become petulant behavior, a little bit on both sides, but there are 800,000 people who are beginning to suffer, and we need to resolve this crisis now.
Congressman Mark Walker, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, there's some shocking video that appears to show a toddler under arrest at gunpoint.
Mine is holding a gun at the baby.
They're telling the baby to turn around.
Wow.
But officers say, well, that video does not tell the whole story, what and how it happened coming up. Plus, a suspect has been charged with 4 murders. Allegedly, that suspect in our country illegally. We'll have new details on that shocking case coming up.
We are confident we have the person responsible for the LaGuardia Lane and homicides, as well as the homicides in Douglas County.
As they arrest her father.
Oh my God.
She made cross road?
No. She trying to get out, but she can't because she little.
She is out.
Oh, she holding her hands
Oh my God.
Oh my God, look at
So the cell phone video here shows a man getting out of a pickup truck with his arms raised while Tallahassee officers aimed their guns at the vehicle. You can then see the child getting out of the car and approaching them. But body cam video does show that the officers were actually trying to coax her over to them.
Hey, come on, sweetie. You're okay. You're okay. Come on. Sweetie, you don't put your hands down. You're fine. You're fine. Come on to mommy.
Okay. The girl's 1-year-old brother was also in the car. Both kids, we are told, are doing fine and were handed off to their mother.
And we have a Fox News alert. Police say a man in custody suspected of killing 4 people in Nevada. And they say he's been living in our country illegally for at least 1 year. William Lajeunesse live in Los Angeles with this story. Hi, William.
Well, Eric, initially police had a single burglary and a murder, then another 2 days later. Both older women living alone. Then came a third, an 81-year-old couple. The police investigation had one common thread, Wilbur Martinez Guzman. They had no physical evidence, but when they ran his name with ICE, they got a hit. He was living in the U.S. illegally. Based on that, they asked the feds to bring him in.
At the same time, surveillance teams were reporting mobile activities that were increasing our concerns for the welfare and the safety of the public. The command staffs of all agencies collectively agreed that Guzman, a person of interest at the time, should be taken into custody on immigration charges.
So following Guzman's arrest, police obtained a search warrant, found enough evidence in his car and apartment to charge him with 3 counts of burglary and possession of stolen property. The DA expects to file murder charges this week. So far, police have not revealed what connects Guzman to the victims. We do know, since Guzman is in the ICE database, it suggests he has been arrested before. Unlike California, Eric, Nevada is not a sanctuary state, so police can cooperate with ICE and use his legal status to assist their case. Eric?
All right, William, thank you. Sandra?
Now on to this new video, which has some people changing their minds about the uproar over a high school student's encounter with a Native American vet during a rally in Washington, D.C. Jason Chaffetz will be here to weigh in next.
If you're a veteran homeowner,
the media has a gut reaction that anytime anything with President Trump is involved, whether it's one of his supporters, an innocent Catholic student wearing a MAGA hat, they are going to be incriminated. They're never going to be given the benefit of the doubt.
Well, that was Kayleigh McEnany, a spokeswoman for the Republican National Committee, weighing in after that video went viral, sparking an uproar online, accusing the student of taunting a Native American veteran during Friday's D.C. rally. The teenager has since spoken out and denied those allegations. Jason Chaffetz, former Utah congressman and Fox News contributor, joins us now. And also, Jason, we've had a chance to all look at the longer version of that video, because initially it was only a snippet that was released that led everybody to speculate over what exactly happened there.
Yeah, well, the additional video shows a more complete picture. And I think these students who didn't wake up this morning, I think, looking for controversy. They're there to support the March for Life. They're wearing Make America Great Again hats. They're visiting a memorial. But I think they learned some lessons being on the receiving end of a lot of taunts, slurs. And I got to tell you, people have got to take a deep breath. These are students. We should be applauding that they're engaged and involved in their government, not trying to take them down online and belittle them because they're engaged with their government. It's shame on those that are trying to exploit this for their own personal political gain.
Right away, the Roman Catholic Diocese of Covington and the high school itself issued a joint statement apologizing to the activist in that video, identified as Nathan Phillips. And then once this longer version of the video emerged, those that were critical of the student, many conservatives, had to come out and walk back their comments, and some have even apologized for them.
Well, they should. Look, we all make mistakes, and maybe we jump to a conclusion if we hear a snippet or a sentence or a tweet and don't look at the complete picture. And that's the true test of principle and character, is do they actually go back and apologize for it, take some ownership of it? I saw Meghan McCain, for instance, put out a statement, said, look, that essentially she was wrong. And I think that's sort of the, that defines somebody as being a stand-up person and taking some responsibility. Even though the longer version of the video has been released and now we've all had a chance to see what exactly happened there, this student said that he's been called every name in the book, including a racist, that I will not stand for this mob-like character assassination of my family's name. He said his family's received death threats as a result of this. This is one example of some jumping to the conclusion, not knowing all of the facts. And the BuzzFeed story, Jason, from late last week also is an example of that. You saw a lot of speculation around all media forms on Friday in the wake of that report, only for the special counsel's office itself to come out and say that report is not accurate. Yeah, no, listen, this is part of the resistance movement. Try to demonize and take a scorched earth philosophy, take everybody down that's in that path. The BuzzFeed story, I got to tell you, is a terrible example, probably a prime example, but a terrible example of the national media, supposedly journalists that are supposed to be responsible, not doing their jobs. I'm tired of reading and hearing about stories that have anonymous sources, no backing, no verification, and then having all the other news outlets go out there and report it. This is the way the resistance movement works. They plant a story, somehow a story gets out, and then they exploit it for 24 hours. They demonize and they put this out into the public. At the same time,
they don't walk it back to the same degree. They don't give it the same type of attention when they have to take it back down.
No, and in fact, to go a step further, Adam Schiff says that they still plan on investigating the claims BuzzFeed made in that report. Yeah. Adam Schiff, who's given a lot of credibility and continues, as far as I know, a lot of credibility to Robert Mueller and his investigation. I just wonder what that says if his committee plans to investigate those claims. Jason, final word to you.
This is the overreach that the Democrats are involved and engaged with. And Adam Schiff said he had conclusive proof that Donald Trump was involved in collusion. We've never, ever seen that. So the number of times that Schiff has gone out and said that he's either going to investigate or he's seen proof that turned out to be nothing, it is shameful that he continues to be the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, for goodness sake. It is absolutely without merit. If you have facts, share them. But until then, it's time for him to shut up and just not stay away from this.
Well, as far as the media coverage and reaction, Jason, do you think any lessons have been learned?
Well, you would think there would be some responsible journalists out there, but there is this phenomenon, this Trump syndrome that goes out there that seems to set aside every principle, everything they supposedly learned in journalism school. They've set that aside because it's Donald Trump. They seem to justify, because it's Donald Trump, it's okay to get rid of our morals and our compass and our way that we're supposed to do things. But the responsible reporting has not been there from some of the biggest names in the media. And that's why I think America has realized that this fake news phenomenon is very, very real.
We'll keep watching all of it. Former Utah Congressman Jason Chaffetz, thank you.
May, well, she's struggling to try and break the Brexit deadlock after last week's crushing defeat of her deal for the UK to leave the European Union. Well, Ms. May is now offering what they call Plan B to Parliament, but will they take it? Here's Greg Palcott. He's live in London, as you can see, with the latest. Hi, Greg.
Hi, Eric. Yeah, sort of Plan B, as we will learn. Yeah, it was showdown time again in the House of Commons, in the UK Parliament, after that stunning defeat by Parliament of her plan to get Britain to exit the European Union or Brexit. Theresa May was back for more. Take a listen.
Mr. Speaker, turning to Brexit, following last week's vote, it is clear that the government's approach had to change, and it has.
Now, if politicians, however, were hoping that there would be a Plan B to replace Plan A, they didn't quite get it today. She did promise to listen more to members of Parliament and also to tweak her plans further to make sure the UK leaves the EU cleanly. Remember, that was the mandate of the referendum that was staged over 2.5 years ago. At the same time today, Eric, she spent a lot of time blasting her critics, and that's principally opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn, who refused to sit down and speak with her over the last couple of days, as well as laying out kind of a timetable of how she wants to move forward. Next Tuesday looks like another important day. That's when Parliament will vote on yet another set of amendments and approaches to this issue. Looming all the while, however, the possibility of another no-confidence vote, which could lead to a new election, the possibility of another referendum on this issue, and March 29, which is still the deadline to wrap everything up concerning Brexit. And all the while, Brussels and Washington watching and hoping this key allies politics gets a little bit calmer sometime in the future. Back to you.
And it continues. Sorry, Greg. Thank you. Sandra?
Well, the shutdown stalemate continues in Washington as President Trump puts DACA back on the table as a compromise. So why are Democrats refusing to make a deal? We will ask Congressman John Garamendi.
As a candidate for president, I promised I would fix this crisis, and I intend to keep that promise one way or the other.
Gazers from around the world are sharing incredible images of last night's total lunar eclipse known as the Super Blood Wolf Moon. The rare cosmic event happens at the same time as a supermoon. Sunlight passing through the Earth's atmosphere turned the moon a rusty brick red. Only 28 of these are expected this century.
Quite a sight last night.
In order for him to ask for a permanent wall and for us to have a temporary fix, we want to sit down and put some stability in people's lives and have some permanent solutions to this immigration problem.
There are many parts along that border that a wall doesn't even work. There's rivers, etc. We have new technology out. We have drones. We have sensors. We should be using all of it.
Well, House Democrats are buffing President Trump's latest offer to try and end the partial government shutdown. They say reopen the government first, with the president proposing temporary protections for the so-called Dreamers and some other measures in exchange for the border funding he wants. But Democratic leadership say nope. Let's bring in Democratic Congressman John Garamendi of the 3rd District in California, who's joining us from Sacramento. Congressman, always good to see you.
Always good to see you on this very special MLK Day.
And it is at that. We'll have some more coverage on that in just a moment. But first, this pressing issue. I mean, what do you think it'll finally take to fashion a compromise to end the shutdown and perhaps fix the immigration system?
Well, I think that basically we need to understand that using the United States government, the most important government in the world, as a bargaining chip or as a hostage in a negotiation really does create very serious security problems in numerous ways for this entire nation. Obviously, we need to protect our border, and we know that there are many ways to do that. Yes, back in 2006, Democrats did support fences and walls, and some 700 miles were built at that time. Question, do we need additional? In where? What locations? All of these questions require some very useful, thoughtful negotiations on how best to spend the taxpayers' money.
Well, you have a very good point there, because it was 654 miles back in 2006 that the Democrats supported fencing. Now it's a third of that, like 234 miles in Laredo, for example, the River Valley. Why did the Democrats then approve it in 2006, but are so against fencing? It's not a wall, it's a fence now.
Well, we don't know if it's a concrete wall or steel wall or a cyclone fence. We don't know that, and that's one of the problems.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but the president has said it'd be a slated, slat steel fence.
Well, that was yesterday, and then it changes again tomorrow and so forth. But the reality here is that before the United States government approves any construction project, we require some detailed construction plans and also the justification of why that particular project needs to be built. In this case, the location and the efficacy of it. But we do know that we have a very serious problem at our ports of entry. Only 1 of 5 cars are inspected. 80 to 90% of the drugs come through the ports of entry, airports, as well as along the borders. We do know that the effectiveness of the American government to protect Americans in so many different ways, everything from environmental protection to the Coast Guard, all of the airports, all of those things are seriously jeopardized by this shutdown. What we'd like to do, reopen the government, don't use the American government and frankly the employees as well as the American citizens as hostage to get a wall.
Well, the president would be afraid and concerned that the Democrats would not negotiate. I mean, here he's gone further, perhaps than before, offering the temporary status on Dreamers and the protected.
Well, yes,
Democrats
he did.
Set it off. They want permanence.
Well, let's understand that what he has offered is to solve the problem that he created. There was a solution for the Dreamers that was in the Obama administration. That's called DACA, Deferred Action, and that uncovered most all of these Dreamers in that. And then the President Trump ended that, creating the problem that now he proposes to solve with this proposal for another 3 years.
What do you think it will take to end it? Do you predict that there will be a compromise?
Well, I am quite certain there will ultimately a compromise. The question is, when are we going to really protect this nation? This nation can only be protected with a viable operating federal government. And it's not just the border. We do know that on the border that there are severe problems being created with the shutdown at the border. A lot of the back office work that goes on with the Border Patrol, with the Department of Justice, with the Homeland Security, that's not happening. Those back office activities are critical in providing the ongoing information. It's not happening. Our plea is, Mr. President, let's open the government. We'll sit down. We'll negotiate. Will there be a wall in all of that? That's what the negotiations are for.
And that is the message from the Democratic side. We're out of time. Congressman Garamendi from Sacramento, thank you for your insight, and we'll see how a compromise can be fashioned for it to be in. Thank you.
All right, well, we are 13 minutes away now from the beginning of Outnumbered. Starts at noon Eastern time, and there's Melissa Francis. What's coming up, Melissa?
Hey, Sandra. Some Democratic 2020 candidates like Senator Kirsten Gillibrand are facing new scrutiny over their past positions that now look out of step with the party that's moving further and further to the left. Some are even apologizing. Is this a good idea, and will it help or hurt them in the race against President Trump? Plus, Facebook could be facing a fine of historic proportions from federal regulators over its handling of users' personal information. Can Facebook ever recover the trust of those users? Should other tech giants be worried? All that, plus our hashtag One Lucky Guy Outnumbered at the top of the hour. Sandra.
We'll be watching. Melissa Francis, thank you. Well, the nation observing Martin Luther King Jr. Day on what would have been the legendary civil rights leader's 90th birthday. The Reverend Jesse Jackson is on deck and joins us next as America honors his late mentor and friend.
My friend, Reverend Barber, put it this way. It isn't enough, he said, just to remember Dr. King. He said we have to, quote, reach down in the blood, pick up the baton, and carry it the rest of the way. I know that's metaphorical, but it is literally true.
Well, that was former Vice President Joe Biden at the 29th annual Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Scholarship Breakfast just a short time ago. President Trump and Vice President Pence just a few moments ago also honoring the legendary and iconic civil rights leader in a wreath-laying ceremony at the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial in Washington, D.C. Here with us now is on this Martin Luther King Jr. Day is a Rainbow Push Coalition founder and president, the Reverend Jesse Jackson. Reverend, thank you for your time this morning. I know it's a busy day for you.
Indeed.
How are you remembering Martin Luther King Jr. today? You were his aide and at his side for so long.
I was blessed to be with him on his last birth date. And that morning he had breakfast with his family around 8 o'clock. He came to church around 10, blue jeans on and a windbreaker jacket, and focused on how to a job, an income for every American. He convened some whites from Appalachia, some coal miners, some Latinos from the Southwest, some of Chavez group, some blacks, some Jewish Americans from New York, on how to have a multiracial, multicultural coalition to fight for a job and income and to end making so many exotic weapons. So it was a day of focusing on jobs and justice and the ending exotic weapons of war that can only kill but must never be used.
Reverend, how does his legacy live on today?
Problem was profoundly through the right to vote. In 1965, blacks could not vote since 1880, almost 95 years. White women could not serve on juries in the South. 18-year-olds who were serving in Vietnam could not vote. You couldn't vote on college campus. You couldn't vote bilingually. That bothered people. Became a kind of new majority that had been locked out for too long. So you look at the elections of 08 and 012, that coalition could vote. They couldn't vote before Dr. King. You look at the massive turnout on November the 6th when the Democrats regained the Congress. They did so because they had the right to vote. And it's been made difficult to vote because of schemes to undercut it. And yet, I think that though he did public accommodations and fair housing, I think the right to vote is the crown jewel of his legacy.
I know you have said of his assassination, it redefined America. How so?
Well, there was a certain sense of assumptions about justice and decency and dignity. And when he was killed, it took away the hearts of many people, it took away their hope. It became our job to tell people to keep hope alive, don't surrender. Cannot let one bullet kill a whole movement. And so we must keep the hope of a multiracial coalition. We've learned to live apart, black, white, brown. We must learn to live together. That's a part of the hope. Love each other, don't hate each other. That's a part of the hope. Choose nonviolence over violence. That's a part of the hope. It's also a way of living and why we should live. And that our mission should be to a job and income for every American, as I said, and stop making so many exotic weapons of war. You can't even, these weapons we make, we can't use them even anyhow. And so we must work diligently on ending war and, in fact, with a real passion for peace and justice.
Do you have favorite words of the late Reverend that you would like to share with us? We've got a few seconds left.
Well, he said that it's always the right time to do the right thing. What makes America great is the right to fight for the right. We turn to each other, not only each other, and love one another as God has loved us, will make America better. We should get better, never bitter. And so he dreamed of that day, the day he gave the dream speech in Washington, from Texas across to Maryland, Florida up to Maryland, we can use a single public toilet. When I see the kids, Alabama and Clemson playing in California, the federal marshals had to take the Harvey Gantt to Clemson. They had to take all three and lose to Alabama. Now you see Alabama and Clemson on top of the world in athletics because walls came there and bridges were built. If we keep bringing down walls, keep building bridges, we're going to make America better and make all of us, in fact, more secure. I hope that sometime we will decide to take those border babies out of those cages on the border and choose to open up our government. We can negotiate in good faith without having to dislocate.
Interesting to hear you take it to
put America back to, that's the King mission, put America back to work and give us job security.
To hear your take on things today as well. Reverend Jesse Jackson, thank you for sharing your memory of the late Martin Luther King Jr. We'll be right back.
Breathe freely fast with Vicks Sun.